Got it.
So good morning again for the third time, and happy Easter. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and my topic today is surrendering into a new life. And I want to begin with a quote from one of the great modern day New Thought teachers, the late Eric Butterworth, who wrote, "Easter is a time to take a new look at ourselves and contemplate the divinity in us, the depths of our own God potential. It is a time to reappraise the principle that makes all overcoming possible." Easter is about all of us having Christ potential. And Maya kind of touched on this in her message, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper. We believe that Jesus was the great example rather than the great exception. And what I mean by that is, if we look at Jesus as the great exception, all we can do is really step back and say, wow, what a fabulous life he lived, and look at all he did. If we see Jesus as the great example, we can look at his life and we can say, I can live in that same way. I can live loving God. I can live loving my neighbor. I can live knowing that a part of me is divine. Let me just share with you how another master wrote. Meister Eckhart said, "What good is it to me if this eternal birth of the divine Son takes place unceasingly, but does not take place within myself?" He's saying what we need to do is recognize that divinity, accept that divinity, and practice it. Resurrection is about new beginnings. We die to one experience and open ourselves to a greater experience. And resurrection isn't necessarily a one-time thing. We can experience a resurrection in our life through a divorce, through job loss, when we lose somebody that we love, when the kids are out and all of a sudden we're empty nesters. It's about a time when our old identity dies so a new one can be born. And I want to read for you a really wonderful example of somebody experiencing this kind of resurrection. And this is from the book Guidance from the Darkness by Reverend Mary Murray Shelton. And I want to read a couple of paragraphs from A Science of Mind magazine, and you'll see what I'm talking about. "Dear friend, I found this beautiful magazine in a dirty, rundown motel room. When I went into that room, I was an alcoholic and an addict. When I left, I was shining, clean and free woman. I was free from my obsession with alcohol and drugs. I was free for the first time in many years. My life before this consisted of being locked up in hospital wards, jails, and prisons several dozen times. One by one, I gave away my 4 children. During one of my more desperate times of loneliness, I stole one of my children. For this insanity, I was sent to prison. I never knew what resentment was. What I felt was a deep hate for the world, but most of all, for myself. I felt guilty too. and knew what it was to be very lonely. The fears I had were many and nameless, and I made several attempts at suicide. This was my life until I found that beautiful Science of Mind magazine 2 years ago in that dirty little room. I read the words that told me God's dwelling place is within me, that if I would still my thoughts, I would realize his presence. May God bless you, my friend, and may he bless those wonderful people who wrote the words that started a chain of miracles. Love, Jane Doe. Jane's healing began when she hit rock bottom, when she was willing to move beyond the life she was living, the status quo. She had no idea what her life was going to be like when she left that room. But she read those words that God would always be with her. And that is what allowed the healing to begin. Easter is about freeing ourselves from limited living. It's about a new way of living and a new way of being. You know, if you believe that you're limited, you'll live a powerless life. If you believe you're a victim, you'll get really good at being a victim. But what we're asked to do is wake up to who we are and to answer the question, or to ask the question, who am I and why am I here? So I'm going to answer those two questions in a couple of minutes. But before I answer them, I want to tell you about a woman named Megan McKenna. Megan is a Catholic speaker and author, and she facilitates groups. And one day, Megan was facilitating a book group when somebody yelled out at her, "Have you ever brought somebody back from the dead?" And her response was, "Yes, I have. Every time I bring hope into a situation, I bring somebody back from the dead. Every time I bring somebody from a place of despair, I bring somebody back from the dead. Every time I forgive and give somebody back their dignity, I bring somebody back from the dead. Every time I listen to somebody, not just with my ears, but with my heart, and affirm the life they're living, I bring somebody back from the dead. Every time I tell the truth, every time I fight injustice, all of those are times when I bring somebody back from the dead. That is resurrection. And we can all do that, just like Jane did for herself, and like Megan did for other people. You and I have the power to do that. And so I want to take a moment and I want to give you 3 examples of what I'm talking about. And 2 of them, as you'll see, are really personal. In the late 80s, I got divorced. I found out one night that my ex-wife was having an affair, and I really thought my life just ended. I had no idea what I was going to do. We had 3 kids. I was sad. I was scared. I'll give you an idea. I was in such bad shape when I went to see an attorney. He told me, I'm not taking your case until you go get some counseling because you're not ready to do anything. And how did I resurrect my life? What happened to me besides going for counseling? Just like Megan, I found out I had people in my life that loved me and were willing to be with me. My best friend, when I told him, he said, "What are you doing this weekend? I'm coming over." And he did. He spent a weekend with me, took me on vacation with him a couple of weeks later with him and his family. Another one of my friends came over and he held me. And as I cried and he held me, he whispered in my ear, "Don't worry, Ron. We'll get through this. Not you'll get through it. We'll get through it." Every one of us has the power to be that loving presence to somebody else. Years later, when I did find the love of my life, who's sitting right here, I was working for Mattel Toys. My job got eliminated because my division got eliminated. I went to work for a consulting firm and it was sold after a couple of years. And again, I was out of a job. But I heard this voice constantly that was telling me to start my own business. And it wouldn't go away. And when I talked about it to friends, they all tell me, "Don't do it. You're going to fail." My wife said, "Ron, that's your intuition. That's God talking to you. I'll back you. Go do it." I did it. And I wound up having the most successful years of my entire business career. Once again, I experienced a resurrection. And just one last example. Jack Cornfield and Pema Chodron are Buddhist teachers. Jack wrote about a time when they were doing a weekend workshop for 2,000 people, 2,000 people. And a woman stood up and she said, "I am in such pain. My life partner committed suicide 2 weeks ago." Jack Cornfield turned to the other people and he said, "Will anybody who has experienced a loved one, losing a loved one or a friend from suicide, please stand?" About 250 people stood up. In that moment, that lady knew she wasn't alone and she had the power to face life because if those people could resurrect their life, she too could do that. You know, Ernest Holmes tells us that we've built tombs for ourselves. He said we've bound ourselves by unbelief, by superstition, and by fear. And he said, yes, yet there's always a voice that's calling to us saying, "Arise and come forth." Let me tell you what he wrote. He said, "No man ever walks life's road alone. There is ever another who walks with him. This is his inner self, the undying reality. We must not look afar to see the Christ, for he is ever near at hand. He is always within us." And so I want to share with you that if there's anybody listening to me that's hurting, if you're in pain, that's why you have practitioners there. That's why we have ministers. That's what our life is dedicated to being with people. And when you can't see the God within you, we'll see it for you. We'll help you turn your life around. I was I'm just going to do a quick story about my wife who is a practitioner emeritus. When we were going through prac class together, she wasn't sure if she was going to become a practitioner or just take the class to, to build her consciousness. And one night in year 2, we were practicing on one another. And when the class was over, I didn't get to see my wife during the break. And when we got in the car together, I could see she had been crying. And I asked her what was going on. And she told me she had worked with one of our fellow practitioners, and that person shared with her something that only her doctor and her husband knew. She was going blind. And my wife said, Ron, in a year, she's not going to be able to see. And tonight, I got to pray with her, I got to hold her, and I got to comfort her. And tonight, I found out what my life's work's going to be: praying, holding, and comforting. That's what every practitioner does. We're here for you. Use us. I said before that I was going to answer the questions: who am I and why am I here? So I'm going to do that now. I'm sure most of you have heard the Bible quote, my God, Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Well, I'm not a Bible scholar, but modern day Bible scholars believe that's a poor translation. What Jesus actually said was, my God, it is for this purpose I have come. So what's the purpose? It's the same purpose that you and I have come here: to recognize and actualize our own divinity. To recognize and actualize our own divinity. But that's not enough. There's one more piece to it. We've got to live it. We've got to live it. You and I can create the life we want. We can write the story that we want our life to be. We're the writer, we're the editor, we're the publisher. We can all do that. The true message of Easter is to roll away the stone of lack and limitation, to roll away the stone that says you can't live your dreams, to roll away the stone that says you're not smart enough, to roll away the stone that says you're not good enough, to roll away any of the stones that block any of us from actualizing who we're here and why we're here, what we're here to be. You know, when Jesus went to his friend Lazarus's grave, the first thing he did was thank God. And then he didn't ask God to roll away the stone, because God doesn't do that. God doesn't intervene in our lives like that. You and I need to roll away the stone. You and I need to roll away the barriers that keep life flowing through us. And we can do it because, as Holmes told us, there's always another who walks with us. And Ernest isn't the only one that said that. I want to share with you how other people have put that thought that another always walks with us. Albert Camus wrote, he said, in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all, in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy, for it says no matter how hard the world pushes against me, there's within me something stronger and something better pushing right back. And just one other thought on that. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. He said, "In the eyes of the world, I am average, but in my own heart, I am of great moment. The challenge I face is how to actualize, how to concretize the quiet eminence of my own being." Just a couple of other ways of saying there's another that always walks with us. So, what can we do in our life to practice resurrection? I've kind of gone over some, but just to do some more. For one thing, we can live in the present moment because that's where God is. You know, in CSL, we say we want to create a world that works for everyone. We can do something in our own life, in our own community to do that. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be being the best teacher you can be, the best parent. It can be volunteering, can doing anything to ease the pain or the injustice that we might see. We can pray for other people. We can forgive. I read an article in the Washington Post yesterday about one of the coaches of the women's team, I think it's the LSU team, that prides herself. She's a great coach, but in being hard and not forgiving. And she hasn't spoken to her sister in 5 years because they had a little spat. She hasn't spoken to her father because they had a disagreement in 37 years. I suppose that's one way to live, but isn't forgiving a lot more loving? We can listen and bring hope to somebody. We can bring joy to the people around us. And I'm betting that there's some people listening to me right now that have somebody in their life that would love and appreciate an email, a note, a call, a visit, just to say, hey, I'm here. You count. You matter to me. All of these are ways that we can invite resurrection into our life. So I want to close with a piece from a modern day mystic named Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman. And the title of this piece is Moments of High Resolve. Despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance, but I had forgotten. At the time, it was full-orbed, glorious, and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure it would illumine my path for all the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey, details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents, nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when the darkness are foe and nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and happy Easter.
Yay,
Thank
yay,
you, Dr.
yay.
Ron.
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
do one more thing. I'm gonna share my screen so we can do the affirmation of prosperity so everybody's got that. And then
Zoom, come on.
stop the recording. So hang on. One there we go. Full screen. All right, here we go. So if everybody would, is that our affirmation of prosperity and the ability to donate. You can donate at cslmidtown.org/donate or scan the QR code there. And if you would say with me our affirmation of prosperity. I live in a universe of abundance. As I freely and joyfully give, I join in the divine flow, and all that I share with life returns to me multiplied abundantly. And so it is. And since we're all here, I'm going to stop the recording here.